Over 300,000 people died in Nazi concentration camps as a result of medical experiments conducted by SS doctors. A chilling chapter of human history unfolded. In places like Auschwitz, Dachau, and Ravensbrück, SS doctors transformed medical science into an instrument of unimaginable cruelty. Men like Joseph Mengele and Sigmund Rascher, cloaked in the authority of medicine, subjected thousands of prisoners, Jews, Romani, Soviet POWs, and children to experiments that defied the boundaries of humanity. What drove these physicians trained in the art of healing to perpetrate such horrors? Was it blind obedience to a monstrous regime, or a deeper complicity in its ideology? This is the story of the Nazi medical experiments, a tale of suffering, resilience, and a legacy that challenges our understanding of ethics and morality. Join us as we uncover the truth behind these atrocities, piecing together the fragments of a past that must never be forgotten. Please help grow our channel by subscribing. Also, let's know where you are watching from in the comment section below. The ideology of destruction. To comprehend the horrors of these experiments, we must first understand the ideology that birthed them. The Nazi regime under Adolf Hitler was built on a foundation of racial fanaticism. They envisioned a world dominated by a so-called Aryan master race, with Jews, Romani, and other groups labeled as inferior, unfit to share the earth. This was not mere prejudice, but a pseudo-scientific dogma embraced by intellectuals and physicians who saw themselves as architects of a new order. Heinrich Himmler, the ruthless head of the SS, viewed the concentration camps as laboratories for this twisted vision. Under his orders, doctors were granted free rein to conduct experiments that served both military and ideological goals. These physicians, many trained at Germany's finest universities, did not merely follow orders. They embraced their roles with zeal, believing their work would secure Nazi dominance. Their victims, stripped of names and reduced to numbers, were seen as disposable tools in a grand experiment to reshape humanity. The camps became testing grounds for a regime obsessed with control, where science was perverted into a weapon of destruction. Among the most harrowing of these experiments were those conducted at Dachau, where the human body was pushed to the brink of survival in the name of war. Freezing experiments, the cruelty of cold. In the winter of 1942, within the grim confines of Dachau concentration camp, a series of experiments began that would test the limits of human endurance. Led by SS Dr. Sigmund Rascher, the freezing experiments sought to aid German soldiers and pilots facing hypothermia on the Eastern Front or in the icy waters of the North Sea. The subjects, however, were not volunteers but prisoners, many Soviet prisoners of war, forced into a nightmare of cold and pain. Rascher's methods were as methodical as they were merciless. Prisoners were stripped naked and submerged in tanks of ice water, their body temperatures plunging to as low as 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Others were left exposed in the biting winter air, their skin turning blue as frostbite set in. Thermometers, inserted invasively, recorded their declining vital signs, while Rascher and his team observed with clinical detachment. The Nazis were not content merely to document suffering. They tested rewarming techniques, hot baths, sun lamps, and, in a grotesque directive from Himmler himself, forcing female prisoners into intimate contact with victims to transfer body heat. The results were catastrophic: intense pain, organ failure, and, for approximately 90 of the 300 victims, death. One survivor, a Polish prisoner named Janusz, later recounted the ordeal. "The cold was a living thing stabbing my bones. I thought each moment was my last, but they kept dragging me back to do it again." Janusz's words echoed the resilience of those who endured, their will to survive a testament to the human spirit in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Rascher presented his findings with pride, as if the lives lost were mere stepping stones to scientific progress. Yet this was no science. It was torture, cloaked in the guise of research, a betrayal of the very principles medicine is meant to uphold. High-altitude experiments, a descent into madness. At Dachau, Sigmund Rascher's ambition extended beyond the frozen earth to the skies above. In a series of high-altitude experiments, he sought to replicate the conditions faced by German pilots ejecting at extreme heights, where oxygen is scarce and survival fleeting. The Luftwaffe demanded answers, and once again, prisoners bore the cost. Locked inside a low-pressure chamber, victims were subjected to simulated altitudes of up to 68,000 feet, far beyond the reach of most aircraft. As the air thinned, their lungs gasped for breath, their hearts raced, and their brains starved. Rasche and his assistants watched, noting every convulsion, every plea, as if the suffering were a mere data point. Some prisoners survived, their minds and bodies scarred. Others were less fortunate. Autopsies revealed burst blood vessels and hemorrhaged brains, silent testaments to their agony. Approximately 200 prisoners, many Soviet POWs, endured these tests. At least 70 perished. Rasche, undeterred, shared his findings at a 1942 medical conference, presenting the deaths as a triumph of German ingenuity. His correspondence with Himmler reveals a chilling eagerness, requesting more prisoners to continue his work. These experiments were not merely about aiding pilots, they were a demonstration of power, a declaration that the Nazis could bend human life to their will. Yet the data they produced raises a haunting question. Can knowledge gained through such cruelty ever be justified? That dilemma would linger long after the war's end. Sterilization experiments, erasing generations. In the women's camp of Ravensbrück and the sprawling complex of Auschwitz, the Nazis pursued a goal as sinister as it was systematic: the eradication of entire populations through sterilization. Doctors like Karl Klauberg and Horst Schumann, driven by the regime's obsession with racial purity, sought methods to prevent Jews, Romani, and others deemed undesirable from reproducing. Their experiments were a direct assault on the future. Prisoners, primarily women, were subjected to X-ray irradiation of their reproductive organs, the beams burning through flesh and leaving sterility in their wake. Others endured injections of caustic chemicals, iodine, silver nitrate, that scorched their insides, causing excruciating pain. Surgical castrations, tubal ligations, vasectomies, performed without anesthesia, were equally common, leaving victims maimed or dead. Klauberg at Auschwitz boasted of sterilizing thousands, envisioning a future where entire races could be erased with clinical efficiency. Anna, a survivor of Ravensbrück, recalled, "They said it was a medical check. Then came the pain, and I knew I'd never bear children. They stole my future." Her story is one of thousands, each a wound inflicted not just on individuals, but on entire communities. At Buchenwald, SS Dr. Karl Vernet targeted homosexual prisoners, implanting testosterone capsules in a futile attempt to cure their orientation. The results were catastrophic. Many died from infections or hormonal imbalances. These experiments were not about healing, but about enforcing a warped ideology, where difference was a crime punishable by torment. The sterilization experiments revealed the Nazis' ambition to control life itself, to reshape humanity according to their twisted vision. The scars they left, physical and emotional, endured for generations. Twin experiments: Mengel's dark obsession. In the gas chambers and barracks of Auschwitz-Birkenau, one man's name became synonymous with terror: Joseph Mengele, the so-called Angel of Death. A doctor with a charming demeanor and a heart of ice, Mengele was obsessed with twins, particularly children, believing they held the key to unlocking genetic secrets for the Nazi regime. His experiments were among the most notorious, a descent into madness that left an indelible mark on history. Up to 1,500 sets of twins, mostly children, were subjected to Mengele's whims. He measured their bodies obsessively, comparing Mengele details to prove Aryan superiority. Some were injected with diseases, typhus, tuberculosis, to study their progression. Others endured blood transfusions between siblings, often causing shock or death. In a grotesque parody of science, Mengele sewed twins together, attempting to create conjoined siblings. His fascination with eye color led to injections of chemicals into children's eyes, resulting in blindness or agonizing death. Eva Moses Kor, a twin who survived Auschwitz, recalled, "Mengele treated us like specimens. My sister Miriam and I were injected with unknown substances, but we clung to each other, refusing to let go." Eva's survival, alongside fewer than 200 others, stands as a testament to resilience. Most twins met a grimmer fate, killed with phenol injections, so Mengele could dissect their bodies, comparing organs in a futile quest for genetic truth. Mengele's work was not just cruel, it was scientifically bankrupt. His theories, rooted in Nazi racial dogma, produced no meaningful results. Yet his obsession drove him to commit acts that haunt our collective conscience, a reminder of how far ideology can corrupt the human soul. Dietary experiments. The science of starvation. In the grim confines of Dachau, Auschwitz and Buchenwald, Nazi doctors turned the human need for sustenance into a cruel experiment. The dietary experiments aimed to study the effects of malnutrition and starvation, ostensibly to prepare German soldiers for scarcity or to develop survival rations. Yet the true purpose was often more sinister: to understand how long prisoners could endure starvation while still performing forced labor, thereby maximizing the regime's exploitation of their bodies. Prisoners were subjected to extreme dietary restrictions, often receiving as little as 200 to 300 calories daily, far below the 2,000 needed for basic survival. Some were fed experimental substances, sawdust-laden bread, synthetic gruels or chemical compounds meant to mimic nutrients. Others were given no food at all, their bodies monitored as they wasted away. Doctors measured weight loss, organ function, and mental deterioration, recording data with clinical precision while victims suffered in agony. At Dachau, SS doctors, under the oversight of Ernst Robert Greutz, tested artificial rations on groups of prisoners, primarily Jews and political dissidents. One group was fed a concoction of processed seaweed, another a paste of chemical proteins. The results were devastating. Prisoners developed severe malnutrition, their bodies swollen with edema or ravaged by scurvy. Many died, their organs failing under the strain of starvation. Marek, a survivor of Buchenwald, recalled, "The hunger was a beast inside me, gnawing at my soul. They watched us waste away, writing in their books as we begged for a crust." Marek's words capture the dehumanization at the heart of these experiments. Of the hundreds subjected to these studies, an estimated 30 to 40% perished, their deaths recorded as mere statistics in SS reports. The dietary experiments were not about advancing human welfare, but about refining the Nazis' machinery of oppression. By studying starvation, they sought to push prisoners to the brink of death while maintaining their utility as slave labor. The cruelty was deliberate, the suffering calculated. Yet the resilience of those who survived, like Marek, stands as a testament to the human will to endure. Surgical and bone marrow experiments. In the women's camp of Ravensbrück, surgery became a form of torture. Under the direction of SS Dr. Karl Gebhardt, prisoners, often young Polish women nicknamed rabbits, endured operations without anesthesia. Their bones were broken, muscles sliced, and wounds deliberately infected with bacteria to mimic battlefield injuries. Experimental drugs were applied, often worsening the infections, while others were left untreated to serve as grim controls. At least 5 of the 74 experimented prisoners died, their bodies discarded or executed to erase evidence. Others faced bone grafts or amputations, their limbs sent to SS hospitals for study. At Sachsenhausen, prisoners were forced to run 40 kilometers daily in shoe testing experiments, their bodies collapsing under the strain. Each experiment was a new way to inflict pain, justified by the needs of the war machine. Yet the true purpose was power, the power to control, to destroy, to redefine life itself. Transfusion experiments. Blood as a battlefield. In the sterile, blood-stained rooms of Auschwitz, Nazi doctors turned their attention to the very lifeblood of their victims. The transfusion experiments sought to explore the effects of blood transfers between prisoners, often with no regard for compatibility or safety. The stated goal was to improve battlefield medicine for German soldiers, but the reality was far darker, a reckless manipulation of human physiology driven by curiosity and cruelty. Prisoners, often Jews and Romani, were subjected to forced blood extractions, their veins drained to the point of collapse. The blood was then transfused into other prisoners, regardless of blood type, leading to severe reactions, shock, organ failure, or death. In some cases, doctors injected foreign substances, such as saline or experimental serums, into the bloodstream to observe their effects. The victims, strapped to tables, endured excruciating pain as their bodies rejected the transfusions. At Auschwitz, under the direction of SS doctors like Joseph Mengele, these experiments took on a particularly sinister tone. Mengele, obsessed with genetics, used transfusions to study hereditary traits, especially in twins. Blood was forcibly exchanged between siblings, often causing catastrophic immune responses. One survivor, a Jewish teenager named Leah, described the ordeal. "They took so much blood I could barely see. Then they pumped something into me, and my body burned from the inside." Leah survived, but many did not. An estimated 20 to 30% of transfusion victims died, their bodies unable to withstand the assault. The transfusion experiments were marked by a callous disregard for medical ethics. The Nazis ignored basic principles of blood typing, established decades earlier, treating prisoners as disposable test subjects. The data they collected, scrawled in notebooks stained with blood, offered little scientific value, serving only to satisfy the doctor's morbid curiosity. These experiments reveal the Nazis' willingness to exploit even the most vital essence of life. The victims, reduced to vessels for experimentation, fought to survive in a system designed to destroy them. Their suffering underscores the depths of Nazi depravity, where even blood became a battlefield. The human cost and survivor voices. Behind every experiment was a human story: a mother, a brother, a child. The Nazis documented over 15,000 victims, though the true number is likely far higher. At least a quarter perished, their lives extinguished in the name of a perverse science. Survivors carried scars, both visible and invisible, that lingered for decades. Vladislav, who endured Dachau's freezing experiments, recalled, "I saw my comrades die beside me, their breath fading in the cold. I lived to tell their story." His words, like those of Eva Moses Kor and countless others, remind us of the strength that defied the Nazis' cruelty. When Allied forces liberated the camps in 1945, they uncovered the full extent of these atrocities. The Nuremberg trials brought some perpetrators to justice, their crimes laid bare before the world. The survivors' testimonies became a cornerstone of the Nuremberg Code, a 1947 declaration that set ethical standards for medical research, demanding informed consent and respect for human dignity. Yet for those who survived, justice could not erase the trauma. Their stories are a call to remember, to ensure such horrors are never repeated.